Hi guys, Tracy here. I have some photos here from my recent camping trip, and as you can see I have a whole lot of photos. I'm not necessarily going to scrapbook all of these, but I do have several different stories to tell from this camping trip. And as you can see, I have lots of photos to choose from. And so I'm going to do a pocket page, or well, it'll end up being several pocket pages to cover this camping trip, which we did on Labor Day weekend. And I also have a couple of other photos that are printed up in different orientations. So I thought I would talk at the beginning here about how I print my photos. These photos were printed from my Epson PictureMate Charm, which is a 4x6 photo printer, and I really love my Epson PictureMate Charm. I've had it for a long time. I print all of my photos from it, and I get a lot of questions about how I decide what sizes to print my photos. I like to print almost all of my photos at one size because and these are 2x2, which is great for pocket pages because it will fit really nicely on a 3x4 card, or you can fit several of them onto a 4x6 card, and I usually use Becky Higgins Design A type page protectors for my pocket pages. So this size works really well for me. And what I find is that when you use the same size of photos every single time, you get more efficient at using those size of photos because you just get comfortable designing around that size. So I highly recommend, if you would like to streamline your project life process, I highly recommend printing most photos at a single size, whether it's 2x2 or 3x3 would also fit in both of those pockets. Whatever works for you, having some type of standardized way of printing your photos, I think will really help. It has helped me anyhow. And so most of my photos are printed at this size, and as I go along, I sometimes will change my mind. Certain photos, like for example, this is one of my favorite photos from the day, so what I might end up deciding is to print this one in a bigger size when the time comes, but this way I know what photos I have, and you'll see my process of how I kind of group them into stories and scrapbook them. But that's how I just basically take all of my square photos and print them all at 2x2 because that's my default size, and I can always go back because I print at home and change them up later. Then I take all of my vertically oriented photos, or photos that, basically vertically oriented photos, and I print them at a little bit less than 3x4 so that they'll fit into a 3x4 pocket. And then I take any horizontally oriented photos that are not square and print them up at 4x6. And this one was horizontally oriented, but for some reason my printer won't print it that way. On my computer screen, it looked like it was going to print like this, but on my printer, it printed like this. I tried it a couple times and I thought, I'm done with that. So I'm just going to put it sideways in the pocket. It's fire, so you could be looking at it from any angle anyways, but it was taken this way. So I'm going to share my process with you guys. I'll put you on fast forward and I'll see you in a second. So I start off with these templates that I have that are basically drawn out with a ruler to look like two Becky Higgins type A page protectors. And now I'm going to sort my photos because they got a little bit mixed up as I was doing the trimming, and I want to organize them into some stories. So I have one big pile of photos that is basically around the campground, and that's this pile that I'm manipulating right now. Then I have one that's food. I have one that's Upper Clements Park because it's a day trip we took. And I have a few other spare photos that just kind of go along with different stories that I have to tell that might not have a bunch of photos, but I still want to tell a story about it. So this category called Around the Campground is something that I can fill in any place that I need a card in between some of the other stories. Then I have to tell a story about propane, which only has one photo to go with it, but I have more to say about it than that. Leaving and prep, and then alarm, which is another story that I have to tell. So those are my 6 categories of photos. And this stamp set, so I'm pulling out a bunch of stamp sets here. Most of these are Kelly Purkey stamp sets from quite a long time ago. I love Kelly Purkey's stamps, and so I find that I come back to them again and again. And I found that once I had a pretty good selection, I didn't really need to buy the newest and greatest from her or from anyone else. So I like these classic shapes. I also have some bad news stamps from Studio L2E. And that's because there was some bad news on the trip, just a little bit of a negative story. This is a storage container with little drawers in it that I bought at Michael's, and I keep all of my Project Life supplies that are kind of like things that have come in Kelly Purkey kits. So I haven't received a Kelly Purkey kit in a number of months because I stopped my subscription there while I kind of rejigged my scrapbooking world. And I haven't been doing any pocket page scrapping. I also keep all of my Becky Higgins cards, those are the ones with the rounded corners, in that Creative Memories case. It's a medium case, and I adore that. It's perfect for Project Life. And so I have a big stack of Kelly Purkey cards there, those 3x4s, and a smaller stack of the 4x6s. And I'm going to try to use only these because I do like them, and they have the squared corners, which I prefer, and they've been accumulating. So I felt like I wanted to make a bit of a dent into my Kelly Purkey stash. So my first story that I wanted to tell is actually a story of before we left on the camping trip. So this is a photo that I actually printed up bigger than 2x2. And so I was printing that while I was figuring out my stamps that I might want to use and so on and so forth. This stamp set says, "Good things come to those who hustle," because we had to seriously hustle in order to be ready for this camping trip, because we had bought the camper late in the season. I booked my ticket. I booked the campsite when everybody told me I would never find a campsite because it was too late in the season, but I found one. And then we were just about to get the camper inspected when, well, we went to get it inspected and it failed the inspection and needed a really major work done on it. So we had 1 week before our booked camping trip that we were thinking about canceling, but we decided not to. Hustled really hard the whole week and managed to completely gut the inside of the camper and put it all back together again, get it safety inspected on Thursday, and leave on Saturday morning. So you saw me just heat emboss this. Now, despite using my MISTI tool, I didn't stamp this properly the second time. And so I think that what happened is the card shifted in my MISTI tool between stamping it the first time and stamping it the second time. I'm using Versamark ink here, which is a sticky glue ink for embossing. And so it's really not very legible. So you can tell what it says, but I was feeling a little bit unhappy with the results. So I'm going to use, again, I'm using my Versamark ink. And this time I didn't have to restamp it. It stamped fine the first time, but this time I forgot to use my little powder tool. So I have to go back with this little brush. This is a really soft brush. And what I'm doing is I'm just dislodging, and then I have a tinier one here for more fine work. I'm just dislodging and blowing. So I'm not trying to sweep it off the page. I'm just trying to get it so it's not stuck to the page, and then my breath can actually move it off of the page. And I find that I'm less likely to make mistakes when I do it that way. So this also didn't stamp all that well. I think that what happened is my embossing pad is really yucky. There is stray embossing powder in it and little fibers and stuff. And so when I'm stamping, I'm not getting a good crisp image. And so I just have to break down and buy new embossing ink. So I'll get on that for the next time I have to do some embossing. But it looks good. It's just not perfect. It could be quite a bit more crisp. It doesn't have to be perfect. And especially with Project Life, this is one of many cards that will represent this trip, and it really doesn't have to be perfect. But I do really like how the white embossing looks on that card. This one that says "Just Hold On," I'm basically just going to do some journaling on it. It says, "Unexpectedly, the week before our booked camping trip, we discovered the floor of the camper needed to be replaced. Nana and Papa to the rescue. It was tight, but we got it inspected in time for the trip." So that's the small version of that story. I think I am going to be scrapbooking it on a 12 by 12 layout as well, because I have lots of pictures of the camper being renovated, but that's a different story. But it does go along with this one, so I did want to include it in these pocket pages. And that photo on the good things come to those who hustle, that's a picture of Nana holding the old broken floor that's been replaced, and Scott's actually holding the safety inspection certificate in his hand. And so that's their victory pose. And we also had champagne that night and really celebrated because we worked so hard. They worked harder than I did. I was at work a good part of the week. And so was Scott, actually. So yeah, we did it in a week, but it was really just a week of evenings is what we did it in. And then one full day, we both had Thursday off. So that's another story. Here is a photo of Sophie packing her tea. And she drinks David's tea and she has canisters of tea. So she put them into little tea bags and measured it out and decided what tea she would be taking. So I took her picture as she did that. I thought this rainbow card was really cute because Sophie loves rainbows. It's not a proper rainbow. She always tells me that what the proper order is and which colors are in the Pride rainbow and which ones are not. So she's a bit of a rainbow expert because she did a project on the Pride rainbow for school this past year. So then I also have these two photos that kind of go along with the idea of pre-trip photos. And these are photos of us in the car. This one is a photo of the side view, the side mirror, and it shows the camper in the mirror. And it's the first time that I've sat in the car while it was pulling the camper. So that was kind of neat to keep on looking back and seeing it behind us. And then photos of the girls in the back and me making a silly face. So I decided right away that I wanted to put it on this card that has the wide white strip on the bottom of it. And I love this stamp from Kelly Purkey. It says Adventure Awaits. So I'm going to stamp that in black. I'm using my mini Misty tool for almost all of my stamping in this whole session. I was scrapbooking here for 7 hours. It took me to scrap this whole trip. And the only times that I didn't use my Misty for stamping were times that I regretted not using my Misty for stamping. So I will be using it from now on because I have proven to myself that it's really better to just use it. So I pulled out from another stamp set from Kelly Purkey. I think it might be another, it could be the same. I've got 2 different travel themed Kelly Purkey stamp sets, and this one is a long strip of geotags. This is one of my favorite stamps. I've used it a lot for my travel project life layouts. And here I'm using Mama Elephant ink. It's a pigment ink, so I was hoping it would give me a nice crisp impression, and as opposed to using dye ink, and I thought that I might get it to be a little bit more opaque. And so again, I'm glad I'm using my Misty tool because I did have to apply that several times. It's not perfect. It was a little bit crooked. I didn't line it up right, but that's okay. It looks great. I love the addition of that to that card. It just adds a second color, and I think it really looks great. So putting that back, I'm trying to keep my stamp sets as together as possible so that nothing goes missing. Now, this stamp set I actually wasn't going to use. In fact, I didn't think I'd ever have a use for this and thought about giving it away or selling it or something. It's like a night themed, like stars and planets and stuff. And it's from Kelly Purkey. It's from the Project Life or Pocket Page kit that Kelly Purkey has. And I used to subscribe to it and have several kits that I'll be using today from those days of subscribing to those kits. Meanwhile, I'm going to I'm going to die cut this background plate. This is for card making. It's from Freckled Fawn, and I'll get all those little bits out of that next time I use it. I just can't be bothered with doing it right now. So I'm going to put my die cut plates away. That was my Spellbinders Platinum 6 that I used. It has a great, very small footprint, so I really like using that. I keep it right beside me as I scrapbook and as I make cards. So I die cut that out of a piece of plain black cardstock, and I just went to my stash and grabbed some yellow cardstock. I couldn't find scraps that were big enough, so I had to get a full new sheet. This is Stampin' Up! Daffodil Delight, I believe it is. And so I like how that looks. It's actually supposed to be a snowy backdrop, but I find that if you use yellow instead of white, it does look a lot like stars. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And now I'm thinking where I might want to put some of these sentiments. I really like these sentiments. I just didn't think that they would ever be applicable, but we actually did some stargazing on this trip. So I'm thinking I might, you see what I'm doing. I'm thinking about maybe making a panel over to the right-hand side that'll hold my sentiment. But then I decided, and I like this idea so much better, to use a band of vellum across the middle of this card. And I really, really like that. So this says, love you more than the stars in the skies. What does it say? Love you more than all the stars in the sky is what it says. I am giving the heat embossing another try, even though I did not fix my problem with my ink pad. I also did not use the embossing buddy. I don't know where my brain is today or yesterday, but I, for some reason, just was not doing that. Got a little bit of help from my daughter there, and trying to clean up the embossing powder that went everywhere when I opened my container. And just going to heat emboss that. Look at how beautiful that looks on the vellum. Oh my gosh, it's so pretty. I adore it. I am using my stamp chamois from Lawn Fawn to clean my stamps all day today. And I just keep it, you wet it at the beginning of the day of your stamping session. And I find that it dries out unless if I put a little plastic baggie on top of it, like I keep it in a little bin beside me. And it's basically just like a little bowl type thing, but it hangs off of my Radscog. And I just stick it in there, and then I put the plastic baggie on top of it, and that just slows down the evaporation process and keeps it wet. But if I do walk away and forget it, it will, overnight or by the next day, it'll dry out. So it won't like get all moldy and gross, but it does kind of slow down that evaporation process. So that helps a little bit. And it also gives me a dedicated place to put it so I don't accidentally put it on top of something paper and then it ends up getting mushy and gross. So I'm spelling out the word Star Walk here using Kelly Purkey letter stickers that came in one of the many Kelly Purkey kits that I have, that I'm trying to work my way through today. And so then I'm also spelling out the word app. And the little centers of the letters, I just press them into my hand and then pull off the letter off of my finger. I'll catch it the next time I do it so that I can explain it a little bit better than I just did. But I have a little method for getting the centers out of those stickers. I'm using my grid mat to help me line up those stickers. I did use my thicker alignment tool, but they still were a little bit crooked, so I just straightened them up using my grid line as the guide, and somehow this cut crooked. I'm not sure how that happened. Look at it. I'm going to have to grab my little trimmer again. Actually, I'm grabbing my big trimmer. And it looks okay on one side, but it's definitely off on this side. So this is my Stampin' Up! Trimmer. The other one is a Fiskars trimmer. It's a small little guillotine trimmer, which I love. It's so lightweight, and it does cut straight. I don't know why it didn't that time. It's probably user error. Lots of user error in this episode of Project Life Scrapping with Tracy, including this. So I used just regular tape runner here because what I was thinking I would do here is put washi tape over each of those edges, and I'm going to change my mind on that because I don't like it. It's too much. I knew I had some star washi tape, but that silver sparkly star washi tape was just too much. So I thought that this one might look better. It's just kind of like a roughly drawn, like a hand-drawn looking stripe. And you see me just trying out a whole bunch of different ones, and I can't find one that I like. This one is actually chalkboard tape. And so I'm going to cut 2 strips of this. I'm actually going to apply it before I realize that I don't really like it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it kind of takes away from the look of the vellum, by covering up the edge of the vellum. I just don't like that. So I'm going to now pull off that adhesive. Thank goodness it's ATG, which is very forgiving. You can just roll it up into a little ball and it just comes off pretty easily, especially from something like vellum, which is a very smooth surface. So I used my tiny attacher there instead. And now I'm just going to trim this down. And my thought is that this card is going to be not quite long enough to fill up a 4x6 pocket, but it'll just float in there and you'll see some of the card behind it show through, and I'm okay with that. So that's what I'm going to do with that card. I actually really like how that one turned out. And I kind of felt like I didn't really need to do a story about gazing up at the stars because we just looked up at the stars and found some constellations. I don't know any constellations. And so Scott pulled out the Starwalk app and they just used that. So I think it's pretty, we don't have any photos of it or screen caps or anything from using the app. And so I don't think I really need a story to go with that. And I like to tell stories visually whenever possible because I don't particularly enjoy journaling. So I do like to tell my stories with either images or phrases, captions, and so on. Now this card here with a little grid on it, I think it's going to make a really nice filler card, and I would love to put an acrylic piece on it, but I don't have a huge collection of acrylic pieces. And I don't really have one that is going to work for me, but I do have this one. It actually has love etched in it. And I thought I could put we love and then camping. I've got this tiny little freckled fawn, no, not freckled fawn, lawn fawn stamp set. It's a planner stamp set that I got from Crop and Create. It was one of the freebies that we got. And I thought maybe I could make love stand out a little bit because as you can see, you really can't see it. It's etched in there. I think that this is from Scraptastic. From the Scraptastic Kit Club, and I used a Posca paint pen and I got to get that off there before it dries because I don't like how it looks. So I got it off, no worries. And I'm going to darken it up using my Staedtler Lumo Color pencil, or not pencil, but marker, which is a black permanent marker, so it won't wipe off or anything. And as you can see, it does make the word love a little bit more legible. It's still darker than I would really like, especially the contrast between how dark this acrylic piece is. The piece is dark and then the writing is dark. And then there's a lot of contrast between that and how white the card is that I'm planning to put it on, which is actually not this one, but it's also white. So I did stamp the word camping on there from the Lawn Fawn planner set. And you can't really see it all that well, but I'm just going to go with it anyways. And then I'm going to try to, see, it looks okay. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm going to try to put We Love Camping. And that font is just kind of like a hand-drawn looking font. So I thought I could fake it pretty easily, and I did. It looks okay. Now I'm going to use some clear glue and just fill up the whole thing so that you can't see any places where the glue is or isn't on the back because it is a see-through acrylic piece. So I just covered the whole back in glue, and then when I press it down, it smooths it all out and it'll dry like that. Oopsie, I forgot to zoom out for this one. I'm sorry, but this is a card from Kelly Purkey. It just has a hi and a frame. And so I'm going to do some journaling. It says, we booked last minute and we're happy. Done Roman still had spots left in August. That's all that I'm writing. And I'm going to glue a photo, like use my ATG or I'm actually using Tombow tape runner. Because I find with Project Life, my ATG becomes a little bit big and covers up, like when I put it down on my desk, I'm always covering stuff that I need. So I like to use a smaller tape runner for Project Life. So that is the first page done. Like the first single page done. So now I'm going back to my little envelopes, and these are all what I considered around the campsite photos. And I have so many of them that I'm going to fill this page with around the campsite stories and photos. This photo I tried to print horizontally. It's actually it's a larger photo and it's cropped, but it wouldn't print the way that I cropped it for some reason. Something weird was happening with my with my photos. And yeah, so I just gave up trying. I didn't try too hard because I just wanted to get started with this project. So I just decided to print it vertically, and I'll just put it in the pocket horizontally. It's okay because I could have taken that photo from any different angle. It's of a fire pit and it could have looked that way even if I had composed it that way. So I'm just going with it. So after I spread my photos around the page, and I try to leave at least one or two empty for journaling and filler cards and whatnot, then I go about trying to find a card to go in each pocket, except for the pockets that are filled up with pictures. And so I'm just looking through my cards, looking for anything that might work with the stories that I have out already. So this one is going into a 4x6 pocket, but sometimes I will put 2 3x4 cards in a 4x6 pocket. And right here, I'm thinking about using that purple card as a mat for these photos. And then I'll also use a 4x6 card. I'm just looking through the 3x4 cards first because they're just close to my hands, so it's easy to find them. And now I'm going to look through my 4x6 cards and try to find something that goes with each of these. I like that with these. I like that blue up there in the corner. It's a nice dark color, so it balances off with all that black in the bottom corner. And any photos that I have that have a lot of black, like that fire pit photo, for example, I always try to put those on the bottom because they're very weighty. And I find that if I put one of those heavy black photos up in the top, either of the top 2 spots for 4x6 photos, I find that it's hard to balance it off. And so this just helps me kind of make the page feel cohesive and balanced. So the Kelly Purkey kits, each kit comes with a set of letter stickers, and also each kit comes with a set of label stickers or cut apart labels. I think they're all label stickers now, but when I first started subscribing, they were cut apart labels. So I'm going to start by layering these photos onto the card, just like that. They're both kind of the same photo. One is from the outside and one is from the inside of the camper. And they were different times, but it doesn't really matter. The idea is that the girls are hanging out. And I'm trying somewhat successfully, it's not perfect, but to make that white block that's on the card kind of naturally look like it belongs to this set of layered labels that I'm putting on here. And it looks okay. I'm not a fan of cards that have white spots on them, whether it's a strip across the bottom, like many cards have, many 4x6 cards have, or if it's one of these white spots. I find it really difficult to use those cards. I don't know what it is. Do you guys have any tips on using those cards? Because I am pretty clueless. So I wrote on those 2 labels, the girls bought candy at the campground store, and then in the pink one I put the hangout bunk in quotation marks. Here's a card with hands on it, and it says yes, and I'm putting a picture of the girls helping out with dishes. They're on dishes duty whenever we camp. That was always the case, even when we used to tent camp. And I'm spelling out here in mint green Kelly Purkey letters, helping hands. And I'm using a bouncing baseline here because it keeps me from needing to obsess over having it lined up straight. So I'm going to use this bouncing baseline for almost all of my titles today. A few of my titles will be lined up, but most of them will not be. Then just to add a little something over here, I'm writing on the arms of this set of arms. The girls get dish duty, not a single complaint. I'm not a huge fan of the kit that included these hands and arms in it. There was a stamp set and several cards that have these hand-drawn hands, and I was just not a fan of that kit. But it's nice to get it used. I've used a couple of those cards in this spread, and like I said, it is nice to get it used. So here I am using a block and not my Misty, so you probably know where this is going. It didn't work out. That ink, it's a chalk ink, and it's from Prima, and I just wanted something mint. I thought that it might look good with the take note at the top. I'm not going to like this card. In fact, at the very, very, very end, which you probably won't see in this video because it's a 7-hour process, so it'll probably be 4 videos here. Anyhow, I'm going to redo this card because I don't really like it. But for now, I'm adding some labels to it. and saying pool time and stamping that with VersaFine ink. It's like a little pool icon, I guess, from the planner stamp set that I talked about before. And so I'm sorry to stop so abruptly, but as I mentioned, this was a 7-hour scrapbooking session, so I do have to break this one into a total of 4 videos. So here is where I'm at so far. You'll notice there have been some changes, but if you watch the videos to come, you will see how I made those changes and also the next pages to come. So please check out my next video. I will link it here on this screen. Let me know what you think about this Project Life spread so far, and I will see you over on the next video. Take care and have a great scrappy week.